5 Key Facts about the Parthian Empire. The Parthians re-established Iranian rule over Persia, destroying the Seleucid Empire, challenging Rome, and controlling much of the Silk Road. The Parthians were originally a nomadic tribe of Eastern Iranians known as the Parni who conquered the region of northeastern Persia known as Parthia. From here the Parthians soon established an empire that stretched from Indus to the Euphrates. Though often in conflict with Rome, the Parthians were never conquered and inflicted several famous defeats on the Romans. Meanwhile, wealth drawn from the control of the Silk Road allowed the Parthians to construct works of art and architecture that reflected a culture that blended Hellenistic and Iranian elements. However, surviving source material from the Parthian Empire is scarce, so much of what we know must be taken from Greek, Roman, and even Chinese sources. 1. The Parthian Empire was founded by Arsaces I. The Parthian Empire was founded in 247 BC, by Arsaces I, 247 to 217 BC, for whom the ruling Arsacid dynasty was named. Arsaces began as the ruler of the Parni, a nomadic Eastern Iranian tribe that had been part of the Dahi Confederation. The exact sequence of events that led to Arsaces and the Parni seizing control of the Seleucid satrapy of Parthia is unclear. Yet by 238 BC, Andragoras, the possibly rebellious Seleucid satrap of Parthia, was dead and Arsaces controlled the entire territory. With the conquest of Parthia, the Parni adopted Parthian as the official language of their court and became known as Parthians in the Greco-Roman sources. Later the Parthians would claim fictitious descent from the Achaemenid king Artaxerxes II, 404 to 358 BC. The Seleucids did not allow the loss of their territory to go uncontested. However, conflict with the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt prevented them from launching an immediate counterattack. Arsaces used this time to strengthen his control of Parthia, expand into Hyrcania, and form an alliance with Diodotus II who ruled over the Greco-Bactrian kingdom which had also seceded from the Seleucid Empire. Seleucid campaigns during the reigns of Seleucus II Callinicus, 246 to 222 BC, and Antiochus III the Great, 222 to 187 BC, failed to bring Parthia or Bactria back under control though they were forced to acknowledge Seleucid superiority. 2. The empire was established through a series of wars with the Seleucids. Conflict with Rome and the Ptolemies prevented the Seleucids from further interfering with Parthian affairs. This allowed Phraates I, 176 to 171 BC, to establish his rule independently of Seleucid control and expand his territory around the Caspian Sea. However, it was Mithridates I, 171 to 132, who is most often recognized as the founder of the Parthian Empire. Upon ascending the throne, he came into conflict with the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, which he decisively defeated and annexed its territory. Next, he turned his attention to the Seleucids. In c. 148-147 BC, Mithridates swept across the eastern Seleucid territories capturing Media and Mesopotamia before extending his control to the Indus River. The Seleucid counterattack was defeated in 140 BC, but Mithridates was forced to turn his attention to the nomadic Saka attacking his eastern borders. The threat posed by such attacks was something that the Parthians would continue to deal with. Renewed Seleucid attack in the 130s BC brought a great deal of pressure on the Parthians but ultimately resulted in the death of the Seleucid monarch Antiochus VII Sidetes, 138 to 129 BC, in 129 BC at the Battle of Ecbatana. After this, the Parthians alternated their campaigns between the east and west. In the east, there was a continued conflict with the nomadic Saka and possibly the ᴍᴜᴜ until the early 1st century BC. However, the eastern border was eventually stabilized by alliances with the Indo-Parthian kingdom and the Kushan Empire of the ᴍᴜᴜ. To the west the Parthians continued to expand into Mesopotamia and Syria, occupying ☉Europos in 113 BC. This brought them into conflict with the Kingdom of Armenia which was to have a lasting influence on the Parthian Empire. 3. Parthian culture was a mixture of Iranian and Greek influences. Compared to the earlier Achaemenid Empire, the Parthian Empire was far more decentralized. Parthian kings ruled an empire that consisted of both satrapies and semi-autonomous kingdoms. Nor was there a permanent standing army, although troops could be recruited quickly in times of crisis. This meant that Parthian nobles enjoyed a great deal of power and influence, so Parthian society is often described as feudal. The Parthians were also heavily influenced by both Hellenism and an Iranian cultural revival, though it should be noted that the Greek cultural influence never fully disappeared. Thus, Parthian kings minted coins with Greek and Parthian inscriptions, enjoyed Greek theater, and chose regnal names from the Avesta, the primary collection of religious texts of Zoroastrianism. So while the Parthians were tolerant of other cultures and drew influences from them, the Iranian and Greek influences were the most important. Since the Parthian Empire was rather heterogeneous, most Parthians appear to have been polytheistic. Greek and Iranian deities were blended together, and each city or ethnic group had its own designated deities. The extent to which the Parthians as a whole and the Arsacids, in particular, followed the tenets of Zoroastrianism is hotly debated amongst modern scholars. The Zoroastrian Magi priests were certainly present at the Arsacid court, but other cultic practices they would have considered objectionable continued. It is also important to note that there were minority communities of Jews and Christians as well. At least one Parthian serving as a Buddhist missionary is known to have traveled to China, though the evidence of Buddhism in the Parthian Empire is scant. 4. Parthia fought against the Romans over Armenia. In 97 BC the Parthians defeated and deposed the Armenian king and took his son, the future Tigranes II the Great, 95 to 55 BC, hostage. Shortly after this, the Parthians signed a treaty with the Roman proconsul of Cilicia, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, 138 to 78 BC, establishing a border between their territories. Despite violations, this treaty held for many years as both the Parthians and Romans were distracted by events elsewhere. However, the situation changed as Tigranes II the Great and his son Tigranes the Younger attempted to play both sides off against each other in their political struggle for the throne of Armenia. When Tigranes II the Great submitted to Rome as a client king, the Parthians demanded that Tigranes the Younger be turned over to them but were refused. Thus, Armenia brought Parthia and Rome into direct conflict for the first time. In 53 BC the triumvir Marcus Licinius Crassus launched a legally dubious invasion of Parthian Mesopotamia in support of his Armenian allies and in an attempt to influence a Parthian civil war. Crassus was killed following the Battle of Carrhae, during which some 30,000 Roman soldiers were lost. The emboldened Parthians then extensively raided Roman territory but were themselves repulsed. During the Roman Civil War, 49 to 45 BC, the Parthians supplied troops to Pompey and supported those opposed to the Second Triumvirate. Parthian forces overran Syria and Judea, bringing them into conflict with Mark Antony, 83 to 30 BC, for most of the 30s BC. Armenia seesawed back and forth in its support of Rome and Parthia depending on who was winning and who was on the throne. Following Octavian's victory over Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BC, peace was established between the two empires, and the Parthian ally Artaxerxes II, 34 to 20 BC, ascended the Armenian throne. 5. It controlled Silk Road routes and was in contact with Han China. Contact between the Parthian and Han empires was established in 121 BC, as a result of the diplomatic efforts of Zhang Qian. The Han had hoped for a military alliance against the nomadic xiongnu, but trade relations still benefited both empires greatly. Parthian spices, perfumes, fruits, and exotic animals were greatly valued by the Han, while the Parthians purchased Chinese pearls and silk. Caravans carrying Roman goods such as fine glassware also made use of Parthian-controlled trade routes.